Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Cavan-Smith. Tonight, Sudan suffered so much it cannot afford a struggle for power between two people. Warnings from the UN's humanitarian chief and the World Body's Secretary General as both head to East Africa in the hopes of finding a resolution to conflict. Also, over 120 lives are lost in the most deadly floods and landslides to hit Rwanda over the last couple of years. Emergency services are already racing to bury victims and provide supplies and shelter to those who've lost everything. And the world's longest heated pipeline continues to attract warnings of ecological, social and climate disaster. The EACOP project will span from Uganda to Tanzania, but the huge investment in fossil fuels at a time when the world's trying to limit global warming raises questions and criticism. But first, whilst in Kenya, the UN's chief has said that the international community has to do more to get warring Sudanese generals to peacefully end the conflict currently gripping the country. Antonio Guterres' appeal came as the world body's humanitarian chief arrived in Port Sudan, where thousands of people have fled from elsewhere in the country. Martin Griffiths says that there needs to be better guarantees for safe passage of humanitarian aid. He said that 6 trucks belonging to the World Food Programme have been looted whilst on the way to Darfur, which, along with Khartoum, is particularly badly in need of help after weeks of fighting. Bastien Renouy brings us more from Nairobi.
The fighting continued this Wednesday in Sudan, and as the war rages, it's getting more and more important to bring humanitarian aid in Sudan. Millions of people are still stranded in their apartments and houses in Khartoum without food, without water. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, more than 300,000 people are now internally displaced in Sudan, and more than 100,000 have escaped to neighboring countries. So it's getting vital to bring humanitarian aid in Sudan. But it's still very difficult because of the fighting, of course, and also because of a lack of cooperation from the armed forces. Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, was in Nairobi today. Listen to him.
Aid must be allowed into Sudan, and we need secure and immediate access to be able to distribute it to people who need it most. Civilians and civilian infrastructure must be protected, and humanitarian workers and assets must be respected. I'm hopeful that that will happen, but I'm not yet confident that that will happen. And indeed, we have not yet seen any ceasefire in Sudan last week.
A new 7-day ceasefire should be implemented in Sudan starting at midnight this Thursday. It was brokered by South Sudan, and during 7 days, envoys from the Rapid Support Forces and the army should meet in Juba, the capital of South Sudan, to negotiate. But to negotiate what? It's impossible to say at the moment, given that during the past days, the army and the Rapid Support Forces said several times that they are not ready to negotiate anything. So I can tell you that my contacts in Khartoum say that they do not believe that it can have a huge impact, but they're still hopeful. They hope that it will allow many Sudanese civilians stranded in Khartoum to leave the capital city, and that it will finally allow humanitarian aid to arrive in the capital city of Sudan.
Bastien Renouy there for us. Now, at least 127 people have died in fierce flooding in Rwanda. The disaster is the deadliest extreme weather to hit the country in several years. Most of the deaths happened in Western Province on the borders of Lake Kivu. Clément de Roma with more.
Many residents were at home and sleeping when their homes were washed away or buried by the mudslides. Heavy rains this Tuesday evening caused flooding and landslides in the 9 most hilly districts of Rwanda, leading to at least 127 deaths. Such deadly disasters are not uncommon in Rwanda during the rainy season. This year, between January and April, 60 deaths were reported due to natural disasters in the west and north of the country. These latest landslides and floods are thought to have claimed the highest ever human toll in Rwanda for such a short time. The catastrophe happened just a day after the warning from the local weather agency about heavy rains predicted over a large part of the country for the next 10 days. Relief operations are ongoing, but several roads connecting the capital to Lake Kivu in the west have been blocked by landslides. Nearby, Uganda also experienced similar floods, resulting in the loss of 6 lives on Tuesday.
A huge fossil fuel project in East Africa has sparked fierce pushback. The East African Crude Oil Pipeline, or EACOP, will transport oil along a 443-kilometre heated pipeline operated by France's Total Energy and spanning from Uganda to the Tanzanian coast. The first exports are slated for 2025, but the financing of the project is still up in the air. A string of banks and insurers have refused their backing. Environmental groups warned the project's a global warming, ecological and human rights disaster. Supporters say that it is key to Uganda's plans to capitalise on untapped oil reserves. Earlier I spoke to Baraka Lenga, a Tanzanian climate change scientist who's fiercely opposed to EACOP.
I'm here in Paris to bear the witness what Total Energies, what these two governments, Uganda and Tanzania, and the CNOC, what they are doing in Tanzania, violating human rights, violating climate justice, violating biodiversity justice. So I also have been, I am also here to speak to Total shareholders, asking them to vote against Total Energies climate change strategy.
And so why are you focusing specifically on Total Energies in this project? You know, it's got the Ugandan government's backing, it's got the Tanzanian government's backing. It's all, you know, Total Energies isn't the only operator here. So why are you really focusing your energy on it?
Okay. We are much focusing on Total Energies because Total is the biggest shareholder. And they have been doing this, they have been investing in these fossil fuel projects, killing the planet. So it is a hard time now to focus on them. And we also know that if we target the largest shareholder, we are pretty sure that these minor shareholders, nothing they can do. Yeah. So we are targeting the elephant. These are like goats. We don't put much pressure on them. Yeah.
So you're targeting the elephant in the project?
Yes, of course.
And what about the impact of all of these banks that we've seen refusing to give their backing to the project? Is that likely to have much of an impact?
Yeah, of course, it have a big impact for us. Currently, 25 banks have withdrawn themselves from funding this project. And as I speak to you, 23 insurance companies say that they are not going to insure this project. For us, this is a nice move. This is a great successful, but we are still pushing. So we are much happy that if that banks have withdrawn themselves from funding this project, this means that other banks are going to learn from their fellow banks. Other insurance companies are going to learn from their fellow insurance companies. So we are much happy that we are going to win our campaign.
So the project itself, Uganda in particular is stressing about how much of a key place it plays in Ugandan economic development. Why are you so against the project?
They have been saying that we are against development. We don't love our countries, something which is not true. If you take us and them, it is over that. We love our countries, we love our planet more than what they do. If you do the so-called cost-benefit analysis, you will find that the cost of this project is very bigger than the benefits we are going to achieve. So we are going to make benefits at the expense of amplifying climate crisis, at the expense of oil spills, at the expense of killing our animals, at the expense of endangering our animals, at the expense of losing and destroying our land, at the expense of destroying 200 water systems, at the expense of making the life of 40 million people who depends on Lake Victoria for their survival. We are going to make profit at the expense of all of those. So I don't think that the benefit is much bigger than the cost. We have done the so-called cost-benefit analysis. The only one who is going to make a lot of profit is Total Energies. But Tanzania government and Uganda government are not going to make any benefit. Yeah.
So before I let you go, what were you hoping to achieve with some of the conversations, beyond just convincing the shareholders? What else were you hoping to achieve whilst you're here in Paris? Because there's actually been quite a lot of international support for the pushback against this. What do you think is behind that, bearing in mind it's an African project and yet you're getting support from all around the world?
Yeah, we have been pushing like at international level because this is about a climate crisis. And climate crisis is not just the Tanzanian problem or Ugandan problem. Climate crisis is a global challenge. So we need global intervention to solve this. That's why we have been not only in Paris, we have been all over the world to push against this. Yeah.
Baraka Lenga there speaking to me about his reservations about the EACOP project in East Africa. Well, finally, families living with an autistic member in Africa often struggle to find acceptance and support in their communities. And the resources that are available are precious and can make a huge difference to the quality of life of those that can access them. An estimated 1 in 100 children has autism spectrum disorder. And in Africa, there is a growing push for more accessibility, inclusivity and support. Caroline Lambele has more.
When she was 5 years old, Christine Naji was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Only years later did she find a medicine that actually worked, painting.
Within 3 weeks into painting, Christine started talking, regained speech, regained composure, behavioral changes, confidence, self-awareness, and she got self-assurance. You know, her sense of self was phenomenal. Art really heals.
Now, their home is plastered floor to ceiling in Christine's artwork. Mother and daughter have become advocates for art therapy, holding regular events for children living in slums in Lagos. As the children watch Christine paint, facilitators teach parents new ways to interact with their children with more acceptance and inclusion. Access to resources for such families is still limited. For many, it's out of reach.
A lot of our parents will complain that to get a specialist teacher is expensive. It's expensive because the materials that we use they are expensive. Some of us, we call carpenters to do some of our things for us, improvising some of the materials that I've seen abroad.
According to the World Health Organization, it's estimated that 1 in 100 children has autism. It can be detected in early childhood, but often it's not diagnosed until much later.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.
Special events.
Watch the coronation live from London. On Saturday, Charles III will take the traditional oath at Westminster Abbey. An historic ceremony followed by the unmissable procession, ending on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. Enjoy the atmosphere of the festivities in London and Windsor all weekend with our special editions. Charles III, following in the traditions of his predecessors, a key moment in British history. Watch our special coverage of the event on France 24 and France24.com.